Yeah, one side at a time.
That's right.
Now in front of you, there you go. Open the shed. Great. Pass the shuttle. At least a little bit. You can leave it there, or on that side it'll usually go through all the way, but I'll grab the sword then.
What I was thinking is just there's so much to this. We think of this as
Beater.
You're talking about how all pieces and parts how you do this. Not. It's a
just going to Joanne Fabrics and buying a big bolt.
Yeah. You can never, they don't even have good stuff. You find wool. Pretty good. I used to be able to get tarp and stuff.
Like online is
Yeah.
where you gotta go. Handles made in Brazil.
Comb in the left. You got that salvage loop good?
Yeah, pull down a little bit on the other side. From the one.
Okay. So it's like really sticking out there a lot. Use your left hand with the comb and use your right hand on the other side of the fabric to control the weft thread.
No offense.
Pull down and across, down and across.
I'd rather not have to avail myself.
Be sure it's slack when you set it up in there with the loop.
Have you ever looked at any of the blacksmithing, the ironworking stuff?
Somewhat. I mean, I looked at that master mirror chest, and I've been looking at let's say they're Viking.
Okay, so let me get in there.
Facebook, but it seems to be across the board.
So here's my, I have some working experiments.
Just so that the
Yeah.
thread is
I remember you talking about a forge
not under tension.
Yeah.
All right, good.
And the way they always, you see them building bellows. And there's no, the only information I know that's about this is the church, which is a side view.
Yeah.
The two bellows. There's some,
Yeah.
and then there's the one on the stone, which shows the
Good.
two holes in it. Everyone sees the two holes and see that at the top, where the valves are. That's the worst way.
That looks right.
Yeah.
It's gravity.
When you change the shed, it'll push it up
Every other thing, like,
the rest of the way.
big bellows.
That's fine.
Yes.
Bottom.
Yes.
I'm starting to see people, yeah, so naturally it's closed, and when you open it up, it's open.
Great.
My other thing too, is giving the other
And then open the shed.
valves, just the flap of leather. And great bellows.
Yeah, it's sticky, isn't it?
That sets on pins. So it can float up. And then it's got a piece of cloth or a piece of...
And here we are at the local library doing a demonstration of the warp weighted loom, and I'm just going to take you through a course of weaving here. So I'm going to pass the shuttle through like that and lay it down there. I'm going to adjust my warp thread through here.
I think you guys, I didn't make them, I bought them several years ago.
Lay it up in a place there and then push it up with the comb.
I left you a little check for, I forgot what I paid you for, but.
Oh, pumpkins?
Yeah.
I'm going to change
Oh my
the
goodness,
shed.
those are so stinking cute.
I think you.
I love that.
And the shed doesn't open up very easily, so I'll take the shuttle and push against the shed
Oh, that's cute.
to open it up.
Present of chocolate bar or something.
I'll just lay the shuttle gently into place there. Pick up my beater sword and turning it sideways, I'll push these threads apart to lock the weft thread in place. Finish passing the shuttle through. I need the comb again, and over here I'm just going to pick up one or two threads here. And move that up in place and push it up.
Click on number.
And I'm going to change the shed again. And I'll use the shuttle underneath to help open up and separate these threads apart, since they always want to get sticky.
I think you can have that.
Lay that shuttle into place.
I'll go
Beater sword again. Come up, push. And that's one back and forth for the warp weighted loom.
I need to practice.
Gonna change the shed.
Do you guys recycle the blades as you get down? Or
This circular,
Open up the shed.
we our bandsaw for our little bandsaw.
Pass my shuttle part the way through.
They're short blades. You don't have 6 footers or something.
Pick up the beater bar.
Not terribly wide.
Not terribly wide. No.
Okay.
And we
Pass
just
that.
send them back to Hudson and they retool and ship
Set
them
the
back.
thread up in
Big
place.
Pelican box. We just wind up like 20 blades, ship them.
The reason when I could buy
Finish passing the shuttle.
a lot of it
Lay it down so that thread's
stuff
not going to pull the shuttle off of the loom.
for June Damascus pattern.
I'm going to hook
Yep.
a warp thread and a weft thread.
Yep.
I've been buying it just in
A little better there.
stock.
There we go.
For scrap sources.
Pull down and across to adjust that
Nobody-
loop.
you
I
can't
want to make
waste
sure
it.
there's slack
Oh, that's not a
in that thread and pull it up gently into place with slack
I'm getting.
and a loop.
I'm going back to the old way.
Press those up into place.
The tool steel and the rest is mild.
Yep.
I'm looking for any puckers. Everything looks fine there. So this is for a header band for a warp weighted loom. Starting out with a warp weighted tablet weaving loom. See my weights here. I've got 3 weights on the end 2 cards, which is 8 threads. 1 weight, 1 weight, and then the other band is banded together with 1 weight and then an extra one. Give it a little extra tension. This is for the warp. I'm going to set up. I'm going to start with these threads here. This yarn will be the weft on the header band, and that will become the warp for the finished piece as this gets turned and becomes a header band. So I'll turn this now. Set up here pretty good. Started with a couple of inches of woven tablet. I have a loose thread here, and then start weaving this, turning the cards, running my weft through the header band, which becomes the warp as I warp back and forth and pull the warp threads through. Started out with the idea of a hat with this decorative edge here, and it was going to be a pretty short piece. I figured I'd go long and go crazy. What the heck, and make the hat and a set of pants with that. So I figure I'm going to need at least 94 inches just to be on the safe side, plus some waist. So my warp should come out to 112 inches. We'll see how that works out. The inspiration for this is some video I saw on YouTube, a class I took at Penzic. I have this book for the reference here. I built the loom kind of like that, and I'm going to try to work something like this warp that was found from just a little before the Viking Age. Support your local library. There was a piece from the 15th century. It's got a little bit of a tail on it like this. So from that tail, it's kind of like that. And then this was examined in detail to find from around the Viking times. It was determined. I'm going to start out with this here. So this is, my header band is a bit longer. Then we're going to take from 2 separate spools and thread that through to become the warp for the warp weighted loom. So wish me luck. I'll try this out here. So it's coming out pretty nice. I'm losing my pattern here because I'm not following the card turning right now. I might just go with that kind of pattern. It's easier to turn it ahead. And then here's another thing that happens with this warp weighted weaving. If you weave on an ankle loom, you know you'll develop twist after a while. You start getting twist. Well, just move that down to the ends. Pick up a couple of threads. Flax goes a lot easier. And I should be able to just pick it up from the shed here. Get it off the ends. And then my weights will twist around enough. And that's kind of a little hooked there. I'll have to. So here's my problem. I have set this up at about 8 threads per half inch, 16 threads per inch. And I'm looking at that and it just looks like it's going to come up too light. So I set it up here. Take a look how it might come up. It looks better, but it still looks kind of thin. So what I'm going to do is take everything apart and I'm going to run 2 threads at a time through each shed. So that's actually going to give me 4 warp threads per pick here, and that's going to really thicken this up, and we'll see how it comes out, because I don't want to come out with too sheer of a fabric, and I'm not sure how tight I'll be able to beat this. So fair amount of work came out of this. This is with a thicker thread. And part of my problem, I think, is that I'm using a wool, a very light wool, and a light flax, a linen thread. So this linen doesn't thin out when you stretch it, but this one does. So if I take that and I just give it some tension on there, it kind of thins out. So I'm going to double this up and see how things work out. So here's the deal. I'm going to warp this up. This is the tegel find here, and then using 2 balls of yarn, pulling through your warp threads. In a continuous pull, so you don't have to cut a bunch of threads. but instead of one thread from each ball of yarn, it's going to function as 2 threads. I'm going to pull 2 here, and then I'm going to pull 2 through the next shed, and then alternate as I pull the yarn to create a weft on this tablet weaving, and those weft threads will eventually become, I'm going to lace this into a form I made. 2, so these 2 will pull functionally as 1 thread, and these 2 will go through the other 2 holes there. Put that under here, and then I'm set up here. So I'm going to pull from here, continuous loop out, come around all the way around here, back, and then I'm going to go in the same direction each time around this last peg. I'm going all the way back, back, and back. Then I'll pull the next pair of threads through. And when I get done down here, as I get a section completed, I'll take that and just tie it off, and these threads should separate into a natural natural front and back. Pull that in a little, change my shed. So I do have to figure out a way to not get tangled up here. And insert the loop. That's the next thread we're going to do. Alright, so that's on that one. I think it's working out, hon. What do you think?
Yeah.
So let's see. I gotta pull that tighter. This is the next one I go through. Shed looks changed, and here we go. Hard to find the right two here. I think it's that one. Yeah. That's better. So this last 4, take it. So I'm coming out with 4 threads in each shed. And by the time I go down the road, I should get adequate density there. So that's about 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, 4, 8, 12, I guess about 16 per inch. And that's how it's going to hang, so that should be about right. Pattern. Originally a square snake is going to turn into whatever it turns into if I just go all forward. So it'll be interesting. And happy weaving. And I'm going to need something to attach the warp to the weight. So I'll make some strings about the right length here. And that will effectively weight the warp with the warp weight. Find somewhere of a convenient length. This turned out to be a pretty good length, so I've set up a form. You're going to need to make, let's see, 24 of these. Make a good square knot. Pull it tight. Just going to double it up. Keep these threads pretty short. And one for each weight. Now that I have the warp and header band set up here, I have to divide everything into bundles where it will be one weight hanging on each set of bundles here. But where it came off of the last weaving process, I have these bundles here. So I've divided up into fairly equal distances, approximately the same amount of threads for each bundle, except the end where I have a few fewer threads. I'm going to wind up with extra tension on the outside bundle to try to prevent it from narrowing as the weaving goes on. Up here I've tied off the top of the header on the top because that seems to help spread things out, even the tension well. And where I've stitched along here the header band to this helper bar, it's not quite even. I'm going to see how that works out, and I might need to re-thread this, but it looks like it's going to be good enough. So the next step here, after everything's been divided up, is to separate these into the natural bundles and then divide them. So this one here is most of a bundle, and on the end I have the front marked in red, and I have the back marked in black, so that when I cut in between the black and the red, I will get a separation of the front warp and the back warp. And here it hasn't really quite separated yet, but it'll just kind of come apart and go right up through up to the top here. You got to make sure there's no cross threads or whatever, and then I'll have a natural bundle here where I can divide that, move on to the next couple of bundles here, and then start hanging some weights, get some tension on here, and I think I'll be pretty close to starting to weave then. Oh boy. And I'll go on the last bundle here. Trying to make sure there's not too much twist in it. Then my front and back should separate nicely. Snag, come right out, very good. So that looks good there. Even out the threads. and eventually cut and tie that again. So I have an end like that, and hang the weights. The next 2 threads. Okay, and then that's my last thread on this rock, so I'm gonna just pull back here and pull back a little, huh? And come down here and change my weight over to the next group of threads so that there's some tension on that while I'm doing the spacer cord. Roughly line them up here. And you want to take 1 thread from the bundle that's going to be on 1 set of stones, on 1 stone, 1 weight. So that'll be there. I have 1 thread from that bundle, and then I have another thread from the next bundle that's going to go on to the next work weight. That should help prevent gapping between the threads when we're using those weights. So I'll come up here, pick the next 2 threads, catch it behind, and I'll keep going across with that. This thread I'm stitching with is all behind the row that I'm working on. The back row is already done, and then this can be used to pull the warp a little wider if you need to. And I noticed that I could put more than just 2 threads in each of those stitches, but I thought 2 would be a good number. If it goes straight across, I get a little bit of a warp there, so if I pull these down and do a little squiggly, I can get the threads to line up a little better. Once this is all done, I'll pull all these threads down, and that'll help tension and even out the tension on these warp threads up here when I start to work that. Then the next step will be to stitch the heddles. All right.
What are you doing? Pickup weaving?
I'm setting the shed for the heddles. So this is going to be the back shed. It's going to become the front shed. And then I'll knit my heddles onto these. And that'll pull this way.
Okay.
And then back the other way.
Okay.
So this is so that I have somewhere easy to grab onto the heddles. Right there.
Okay.
To grab onto. Okay?
Okie dokie.
So I've been practicing some weaving, and this is what we've gotten so far. But I'm going to take a break here and redo the heddles. As I mentioned before, they are a little bit long, so what I've done here is set up a helper bar to get a little bit more length out of them, and that was working okay. The shuttle I made, but we'll see what happens here. Pull these. And that gets me a good shed. So I'm happy with that. But the other problem is that these heddles are not passing through and coming through easily. So I kind of have to pull them through. Like that is a pain in the butt. And the problem seems to be that here, these heddles are made of cotton, and they're a little bit thick, and they're a little bit grabby. They kind of grab on here. There's a little bit of resistance there. So what I'm going to try to do, well, I'm going to do it, I'm going to replace these heddles with the linen that I've been using. And these threads are a little thinner. and a little less grabby. So when I do it, I will lock every other stitch with a locking stitch. Over here, I didn't do every other stitch. I was doing every 3 to 5, seeing how it would come out, and it kind of works okay. But it does tangle up a little bit. So I'll come in here and like here, every other stitch. It's got a locking stitch in it. And here, every once in a while I did one. So with the thinner yarn here, I should be able to do a locking stitch every stitch. So these are the new heddles. And they're a little shorter. So now when I come over here to move the heddle rod, move the heddle rod out of the way here, in a position to change the shed. Everything slides through nice. I get a pretty good shed, and it opens up easily. I just come underneath here, and I'll come under the heddles and use this bar, and as I push, that opens the shed right up. Then I'll do this course and come through and change the shed again. So I'll pass my weft thread through. We'll come back here. And pass it back. I have a similar problem, but this one is easily corrected by pulling the front warp, and that goes pretty quick. Does not slow me down a whole lot. And this is the warp that we get. This one comes in a little behind this upright bar here. Down here, we've got a helper, a chain stitch spacer string in the front. That's also running across the back. And I've got a weight that's kind of hanging up kind of high. I'm going to change that, and I'm going to lower that weight down. Thing through there. Now this will, from this end, untie this knot at the top. Boy, that got tight. And then eventually, where I could pull that out there. I have a chain stitch. Take it down a couple notches. That should hang a lot lower. Put it back in place around my helper bar. Okay, so here's my chain stitch. I could just keep pulling that out. Take this, loop it through there, and then snug that down. And that might be a little too long. Just hang the weight back on there. And yep, hit the ground. So I'll have to add one more chain back in here. Alright, so that's a tight string. And if I do this tight, you can already see it's starting to pull this in. So We'll take that out. Keep the width set here. And then with just a little bit of slack on there, I'm going to pull it up to about here. So I have a little bit of a loop going on, and that will help take up or add some slack so that when the threads cross, it'll pull this tighter. Now I'm going to set this in here, kind of just tuck it up here, and that looks good. Right here I have a little bit of a knot. Sometimes just tap that again and it'll pull on either side of the bulge. You can get those little extra pieces of weft yarn that will stick out when there's not enough tension on there. Now change the shed, and I'm going to have to pull these out a bit. Put my shuttle in the shed just on the end. Put my beater bar. Separate the threads, put some tension on there, and that drives the weft thread tighter. And now we're going to pull back the other way. And I'm going to lay this down so that hopefully next time I pick it up and pass it back through, the threads will just come off. Here I have just a little bit of a loop left, and the string goes down and then across. If I just change my shed or beat that into place now, I'm going to have a big loop on the end. So hook the loop, pull some tension, get it hopefully where I want it, at a V angle. I'm going this way with the thread. I'm going to pull it up, and I'm going to leave too much slack on it. And when I start putting it up into place, yeah, that looks pretty good. Sometimes you'll see those puckers out pretty good, and might want to pull the thread down again and back up again as we're beating this into place. And I like to try to make sure it's nice and even and smooth looking. Now we'll change the shed. And I'm going to push my threads to open the shed. I'm going to put the shuttle in just so it starts. Beat and open up the shed up to the last weft thread. And that's one pass.
it.